Good evening. Thank you for tuning in to the Lessons of Vietnam show, where we strive to tell you the real stories of the Vietnam War and the men and women who served it. It's important to us to dispel some of the myths and misunderstandings and so forth of the war and its participants. I am Bill Dixon, a Vietnam veteran, 1967, 1968, Tet survivor, and your host for the show. We broadcast from the international headquarters of Nissan Communications here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and where he is nice enough to volunteer his time and his equipment so that we can get out there and dispel these myths. You're welcome and encouraged to call in to the show. As you can see on the screen there, the best way is to call in at 919-518-9773, or even better is go on Skype, which is a free service, by the way, if you don't have Skype. And it's computers 2K voice, and you can get in and ask questions and so forth and so on, and make comments and whatever you'd like to do, basically. Our show tonight is a little different. We had talked about doing a show called about deserters and desertion, but we got a better opportunity tonight. We have a guest with us tonight. She and a co-host wrote a book with a unique concept and so forth. We're going to get into that. And if you know, as we always say, we're 22 a day. That's too many. If you know a veteran out there who's having problems, have them call this Veterans Crisis Line and reach out for support. If it's you're a veteran and things not going the way you'd like to be, reach out. And if you know someone, be sure and encourage them to this. It's just 22 a day, just too many. Okay. Let's see. We're going to get started on our presentation. Okay. The name of the book is To Any Soldier, a novel of Vietnam letters. It's an interesting concept, and I'm going to kind of give you a summary of what it's all about. That we're going to, a little bit. The summary: in 1968, Jay Fox is a young Marine attack pilot in Vietnam, and Ashley Beth Justice, you can tell she's Southerner, as a college freshman in North Carolina, where they meet each other by chance through letters. Ashley Beth, naive and totally separated from the Vietnam War, begins her letter writing as a way to personally contribute to the war effort. Having recently moved away from her small hometown, she began to see the world from a new perspective. We all been through that one time or the other, okay? And Jay, in the midst of bombing runs, each evening has purposely distanced himself from any close relationships. But there is something about Ashley Beth's innocent and forthright manner that compels him to answer her letters. And we're going to find out just how those letters came about. The reality of the war hits home for Ashley Beth when Jay describes his plane almost colliding with another after a dangerous bombing run. The stakes are high now, and the disagreements more intense, the flirtations more significant. Amid even the bloodshed in Vietnam and the civil unrest at home, Jay and Ashley Beth dare to dream of life together while struggling to understand the war and themselves in To Any Soldier. And the unique concept. This book has won many awards. Some of them here is To Any Soldier received both the Editor's Choice and the Rising Star Awards from Our Universe. It was also featured in the April edition of Booklist magazine as a purchase recommendation to over 60,000 librarians. If anybody would read a book, I would think it'd be a librarian. About the authors. To Any Soldier was written by G.C. Pete Hendrix, author of the critically acclaimed novel The Second War, Viking 1990, and Kathryn Watson Quigg, who by chance tonight is our guest, a published poet and guest commentator on NPR. This epistolary. You pronounce it.
Epistolary.
Yeah, that's what I said. People who watch this show regularly know that I kill words from time to time. Novel, while not autobiographical, is grounded in their personal experiences. Okay. This is Kathryn. Kathryn, I'm going to read this because I don't want you to feel bad about reading your own, but I'm going to let you read GC's then. Ms. Quigg is past chair of the Wake County Board of Education, the nation's 16th largest school system, and recipient of the Stanley Frank Leadership Award for North Carolina Leadership in 2000, and the Friends of Education Award for the Wake County NCAE, North Carolina Association of Educators. Okay, that's what I was trying to say, but it wouldn't want to come out. She presented a paper at the Oxford Roundtable in Oxford, United Kingdom. When I first read that, I'm going, she presented a paper in Oxford, North Carolina, which is not very big, but then I saw the UK. She has served on numerous boards and committees during her career. She has a BA in English from Wake Forest University and an MED from the UNC Chapel Hill. Well, we can overlook that part. Kathryn is a watercolor artist, certified reality therapist, and she has a first-degree black belt, in Taekwondo. She lives in Wake Forest, North Carolina with her husband, Tim. They have one adult son, Seth. And while we're on the subject, folks, I want to tell you that those of you out there who don't live around here, Wake Forest University is no longer in Wake Forest. Sometime about 1956, somebody stole Wake Forest University from Wake Forest. And Kathryn says that she came along after they moved. So I'm going to let you go talk about your co-author there, if you don't mind.
Okay. Pete Hendrix is a decorated Marine attack pilot with more than 200 missions in Vietnam. He flew in 1970. He's taught creative writing at both Duke University and North Carolina State University, and he was selected as a Tar Heel of the Week by the Raleigh News Observer for his environmental contributions in the field of deconstruction. He's the father of Holly and grandfather of Olivia. It says he lives in Big Fork, but he just moved several months ago to Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Okay, very good. And hopefully Pete can call in tonight wherever he's at and talk to us. Okay. Let's talk about some of the reviews and so forth. This is comments by Edwin Graves Wilson, Provost Emeritus at Wake Forest University, to any soldier, a novel of Vietnam letters. And he says, the letters held me so tightly and warmly that I read the book at one setting. There's nothing else like a Vietnam War that's quite like it. I might add that I was in World War II and appreciate the importance of letters to and from home. I still have the letters I received from my mother when I was in the Pacific. Very nice recollection there. A book review by Kirkus Reviews. Is that how you pronounce it?
That's correct.
I got that one right. A novel about a collection of letters between a Marine fighter pilot in Vietnam and a college freshman that tracks a profound friendship. In 2001, 56-year-old Jay Fox finds a box of letters in his shed that he wrote when he was a young fighter pilot in Vietnam in 1968. A college freshman, Ashley Beth Justice, had written letters to any soldier as part of a pen pal program, which was apparently designed to boost morale of soldiers overseas, and Jay chose to answer it. Both correspondents were brought up in North Carolina, but other than that, they seemed to be worlds apart. A beautifully aching, affectionate love story in correspondence. Blue Ink Review. With the exception of prologue and epilogue, this compelling novel is told entirely from the late 1960s correspondence between a teenage girl and a Marine attack pilot stationed in Vietnam. This is a finely written, illuminating tale about an era where our country was at odds over a war that many opposed, a war where veterans were often seen not as heroes but villains. The characters are likable but imperfect. Their situation realistic. Their correspondence humorous, direct and enlightening, particularly as it pertains to the life of a fighter pilot at war. Such a tale could not be predictable, but to any soldier does not take the easy path, and the outcome is a question with a very poignant end. This tale takes on difficult issues without blinking, and readers will close the book feeling enlightened and moved. To any soldier is sure to please a wide audience. Now, I have shortened some of these reviews. If you want the reviews, I'd be glad to send the entire review to you, but it was so long, okay? All right, now, Kathryn, there's Kathryn on the screen there, and we're going to talk about how this book came about. I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can tell us what you want us to know, and don't tell us what we don't want to know, and
okay.
So forth.
Well, I'm excited to be here tonight, and I really appreciate this opportunity. The way the book got started, I felt like when I was in college that the war in Vietnam was very much separate from college. We would walk by black and white TVs and we'd see people doing body counts on a hill, and it was like a B movie on TV. But I really didn't know what was going on over there. I didn't have a brother or a cousin or a friend. I had a couple of friends over there, but not real close friends. I actually wrote to one boy a time or two, but not very often. And I just didn't feel like we knew what was going on. I think it's sort of like wars today. Over here in America, we live our lives. We go do whatever we want. We go to movies, we go out to eat, we do whatever we want to, and there are boys in harm's way right now in the wars. And that's what was happening when I was in college. We were going to parties, we were going to dances, we were doing the things, normal things that college students do, but we weren't really realizing that people were dying every day. And so that was the premise of the novel, was to show the separation here in the United States from a person who is actually in the war. And so it was my idea to write this novel, but I didn't feel like I could write the military part and really effectively present a soldier or someone living in harm's way every day. So I talked with Pete Hendrix, who had also written a book in 1990 called The Second War, and he got literary acclaim for it, and he actually lived in Wake Forest at the time, and asked him if he would be willing to do this with me, and we decided on the letter writing format in order to show her separation, her naivete, and his everyday going out to battle every night, dropping bombs and possibly not coming back. And so that's how it all started, and I had to give him my writing samples to prove that I was a good enough writer to write with him, because he's a very, very good writer. And he decided to do this with me. And so that's how it got started. And I'm excited that it did, because it turned into something far more than we ever thought it would. I'd like to share, if it's okay with you, the prologue, because that sort of sets up the story. And if you'll let me read the prologue to you, then I'll answer any question that you may have, Bill, or any question that the audience might have, and also share some of the pictures if you want to,
Okay.
or other parts of the book if you'd like to hear that.
Well, in the book, you have the letters from her are using one script, and the letters from him are kind of like he was typing on a typewriter, and hers are like she writes it in longhand.
Right. We wanted it to feel like, for the reader, that they were actually reading somebody's mail. Everybody likes to read somebody's mail. So that was how she wrote it, like she was writing in longhand, and he wrote it on an old typewriter. And Pete actually said that he did use a typewriter when he was writing letters back home.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'll read the prologue. November 30th, 2001. He stepped into the classroom wearing blue jeans, a white Western-style dress shirt, cowboy boots, and a John Deere baseball cap. Jay Fox was still an imposing figure at 56, a big man, strong and weathered from his years in the sun. His hair cut short, military style, his face clean-shaven. He moved like a soldier as he strode across the front of the room, looking at the maps of Vietnam, studying the 25 adolescent faces, and absorbing the quiet that followed his introduction. Moving methodically, he turned to the class. This room looks a lot like our ready room in Danang. It was about this size, with maps all around the walls, just like your maps. We sat about where you're sitting, while the colonel told us about our mission for the night. Jay looked out over the faces not much younger than his when he flew over 200 missions in Vietnam. A young girl with dark blonde hair shyly smiled at him, tossing her head the way she had, taking him back. He quickly moved his eyes to the rest of the class. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We've showered after our naps and put on our flight suits. Every man is serious, dead serious, focused as we listen to the briefing. My navigator, Randy, is by my side, and my A6 is being fueled and readied for the midnight run, checked and rechecked. Jay walked to the maps and pointed to Danang. This is where I was stationed. He turned to the group and explained. For 2 hours, we listened, asked questions, and planned for the bombing run. We're Marine attack pilots and navigators, the best the U.S. has to offer. Ready for whatever comes our way, ready for our last supper. Jay looked down and swallowed. That's what we called it, because we never knew for sure if we would be coming back, he said. After supper, we wrote letters or watched movies or slept, anything to pass the time, and get us to midnight. I always wore a red bandana around my neck, my good luck charm from a girl back home. Jay cleared his throat and stared directly at her, almost through her. Every night at 11:30, I checked my plane, the one that said Lieutenant J. Fox and later Captain J. Fox on the canopy rails. I talked to the engine man, walked around the tires looking for tread wear, rubbed the nose, and then walked back to the ready room to suit up and get any final instructions or changes that may have come in during the last few hours. It was a ritual, almost like a prayer, each day exactly the same. Jay took a deep breath, looked down at his watch, and began again. At the stroke of midnight, Randy and I strapped on that 60,000 pounds of metal, fuel, and bombs and began the reason for living, flying a bombing run in Vietnam. It was like a giant dodgeball game in the air to run through a barrage of firepower, deliver our bombs, and lift above the anti-aircraft artillery, sweating and frightened by the guns that almost got us. Jay wiped his brow as if he was reliving the scene. His eyes peered up to the left. He caught himself, pulled his gaze back to the class, and said, "Our mission accomplished, our enemy destroyed. We returned to base and headed to the officers' club for beer and whiskey and with the other returning pilots. We were comrades, saluting and celebrating another day and mourning those who wouldn't celebrate again." Jay then smiled and breathed deeply and said, "The cook fixed us grits, and that's what they called me and Randy, grit flight. After breakfast, we slept, sunbathed, ran for exercise, or wrote letters to the folks back home, to the girls we hoped to see on our return. We didn't have a lot of time to think about what we were doing. We worked hard every day, treated everybody with respect, and ate our last supper each night." Later that evening, Jay called to his wife as he strode out the back door, told her he was going to the storage shed to go through some Vietnam letters. He explained that speaking to that class made him want to look up a few things. Jay moved slowly to the shed, his arms and legs sore from repairing the back pasture fence that afternoon. His lantern was swinging beside him, while his dogs, Alpha and Harley, danced toward a new adventure. After propping the lantern on top of the file cabinet, Jay turned a wooden crate on its side so he could sit straddling the file drawer. The dogs settled at his feet. He knew which drawer to pull, and from there he went directly to some old letters tied with string. There were the family letters, the friends' letters, and then there were her letters, wrapped in a clean but tattered red bandana, just where he'd placed them, with the copies of his own letters spaced in between. The guys had teased him about keeping copies of the letters, but that's how Captain Fox was, meticulous in every detail, knowing every word he sent out, along with every detail of every mission. Jay rubbed his eyes in the soft flickering light, put on his bifocals, and opened the first letter.
And I believe the concept is that she wrote the letters to any soldier, and it was put on the bulletin board, and he just happened to walk by and see it and decided to correspond and just kind of grew from there.
She's a very naive freshman who's had very little experience in the world, and she's going to do her good deed and send a letter to the soldiers and do her part in the war effort. And so she sends this letter, and he just happens to pick it off the bulletin board. If she had gotten a letter from a foot soldier or someone like you did, some of your experiences in the war, it would have been a very different story. But he was a pilot, so every night he flew. And in a way, they were both separated from what was going on the ground because he was in the air and she was way away in another continent. And so that's how it all starts. And so they both they don't know each other in the first few letters, and they're trying to tell each other about themselves. And that's really how Pete and I wrote the book. We wrote one letter at a time, and we picked the year 1968 because there were so many events that happened during that time that we could refer to in the letters. For example, the Tet Offensive in, I believe it was January, and then Johnson says he's not going to run for office again, and Martin Luther King is shot, and then Robert Kennedy is shot, and then Russia invades Czechoslovakia later in the year. So there were historical events that we could refer to in the letters as we rode our way around the year.
Along with the riots and so forth when Martin Luther King was assassinated.
Right,
so,
right.
A lot of things going on here as well as in Vietnam. I know being in Vietnam at that time, looking at the news, some ways that I was more worried about my wife here than I was me in Vietnam because there was so much. It was very frustrating. Here I am in another country fighting a war, and there's a war going on back home, and it just, as a soldier in Vietnam in that period of time, it was very hard to come to grips. And the letters from Ashley was, I know, very informative and let him know what was going on and so forth. And I can see how it would be very beneficial and very cathartic to both of them and so forth. So, did you know anybody that was that you knew that at the time that had gone to Vietnam?
I had one friend that was a medic on a helicopter medic who would go out. And I remember writing to him a time or two, but not very much. We were just friends in high school. The man that shared his pictures, I was on Facebook when we were finishing up the novel, and this friend of mine from high school that I knew him, but we were not close friends. But he was continually posting pictures of his Vietnam experience on Facebook, and so so many of the pictures that he put on Facebook related exactly to what the character Jay Fox talked about in the novel. And so I asked him if we could borrow some of his pictures and use them in the book. Our editors had told us that since the book was inspired by true events, we could put pictures up that were really true. So we used some of his pictures and we used some of my pictures from college in the book, and it seems more real that way. It was not real, it's fiction, but we made it seem like real, and we did it in a way. We wrote a letter, the other one would answer the letter, then we'd write another letter, and we tried to follow the year that way.
Well, Kathryn, the services give each other a hard time. So all you Marines out there, I want to let you know that the book has got lots of pictures. So even y'all can enjoy the book out there, the grunts out there, the Marine grunts. And, I had to do that. It was so easy and so forth. The Marines tease us and we tease them. We all tease the Air Force. I mean, the war for a Marine pilot, a fighter pilot was different also, because a lot of his job was supporting the ground troops. He didn't necessarily fly over Hanoi and drop bombs. He was right there with the guys, and the guys on the ground, their lives quite often depended on him.
Right.
And it's in the first we talked about he kind of stayed off, and it's hard when you got buddies like that and you go out that day and you don't know how many of them are going to come back.
Right.
It's very hard. It was the same way with the other guys. I believe we have a call.
Yeah, we had a caller.
Oh, okay.
Callers, when you call in and I answer, don't expect to be on the air right there and then. We have to wait until there's a break, and then you'll be answered.
There you go.
All right. So
That way that way we won't have to stop in the middle of the sentence. We got it back? Okay. Who is this?
This is
Pete.
GC Hendrix.
Pete, appreciate you calling in. This is Bill Dixon sitting here with Kathryn, and appreciate you calling in. Tell us a little bit about your side of the book.
Well, Kathryn approached me after my first novel came out and letters, and I thought it'd be kind of fun. And it turned out being a lot of fun being Jay Fox, being able to put myself into this character. Because here's this sort of sheltered farm girl who had aspirations. And I remember the close friends I had who were women, who were girls, who I went to high school with. And during this time period, there was so much going on in their lives that had nothing to do with Vietnam. They all of a sudden had opportunities and ideas that my older sisters never would have thought of. And so she had a great idea. And the other element of the book to me was most of the Vietnam literature is dark. And this is a really lighthearted kind of book. You got these kids who are caught up in the throes of history, and they come from fairly sheltered backgrounds, and they are both doing good, and they do good for each other. They somehow through their letters help each other to expand whatever is going on with them. And writing for Vijay Farts was just a hoot. I had the best time being him because he's such a exaggerated character. But to me, the great story here was this young girl who came from a farm and ended up having expanding her life and being able to go out and do stuff. And she got a little help from this fellow who was sort of caught up in his own world, but he was doing good too.
Well, I think it's important that I think the idea is fantastic. The concept that being in Vietnam and right back to Ashley in here, especially North Carolina, it was a tie-in back home. Anything that was a tie-in to home was good, and it was. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it was important. I was writing letters to my family and to a few old friends, but this was, the idea of doing this book gave me a chance to think, man, here's a way to tell the story of what it was like to just hear from home, period.
Yeah. And especially a round-eyed girl from home.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. You're a Vietnam vet.
You bet. I flew 220 combat hops.
That's what I thought I read. Were you in the Air Force or Marines or?
Marine. I was in the Marine Corps.
You were a Marine. Okay, that's why you picked a Marine captain then. Okay.
That's right. That's right.
I guess you didn't hear my comment about the Marines and enjoy the book because we've got pictures.
I didn't have time. To take pictures.
Yeah. Well, I was in the Army. You know how we have to tease each other and so forth. I was in the Army. I was at Long Binh, 1967, 1968. I was there during this period of time, and there was so much going on in the country and so forth. But I do appreciate you all getting together and writing this book. I think it's a very important tool to people to try to understand the Vietnam War. It's got so many misunderstandings. Even though it's a fiction, it could have been real. And the stories in it were real because you had been through it. It was almost like you used characters, but it was almost like in real life you did your experience and she did her experience, and you put together the letters in the book and so forth. Even though she wouldn't write you at the time in Vietnam, it was just basically the same thing because you'd been there, done that, bought the T-shirt, and went to the movie, as we say.
That's right. And you're talking about a time period when you were there. It was probably much more intense than the time when I was there, and that was one of the interesting things about that Vietnam experience. That there are all these different phases, and this book is about one particular year when everything changed.
Yeah.
And I think I've always believed that most of the great novels are written in a time where there's this great historic thing going on, like all the Russian novels were about during the wars. And this was a time in history where there was a lot going on, and here's these two kids, and they're caught up in it. And they're doing all right.
And, even though the book was written about Vietnam, it would pretty much fit with today, with the young soldiers being over here. It's just in time, just like it would be. That could almost be the same. Y'all could write a new book, just what using today.
I think the difference today is that people get immediate responses, and the beauty of letter writing is you had time to think about things and you had time to ponder. So you probably shared more in letters than you would share in an email.
Well, we didn't have any choice. We didn't have
Right.
Skype. We didn't have cell phones. They had the Mars, but that was so complicated to use. Most of us couldn't figure out how to use it. So about all we had was reel-to-reel tapes. We all had a reel-to-reel player. And then the letters themselves, as I mentioned, Kathryn, earlier, I was married 3 years when I went to Vietnam, and the letters from my wife every day were so very important. And sometimes the mailman didn't come, and it was a bad day because they didn't get that mail. And during Tet, we didn't get mail for several weeks there.
I had the cassettes, but one funny thing was I went on R&R to Australia, and the first thing I did when I got to Sydney was, it was early in the morning, the plane landed, and I went in and got on a payphone and made an international call to my sister in North Carolina. And when we finally got through, it cost like $20 or something. It was really, I had all kinds of coins going in the machine. And when she answered the phone, I said, "Just talk. I want to hear a human voice from America."
Yes.
Because all we had was letters.
Yes.
And the cassette. And so she talked for 5 minutes, and it just went on and on about all it is. I thought, well, that's the best $15 I ever spent.
Yeah. Yeah, just anything from home, especially someone's voice. We did some reel-to-reel tapes, a little reel-to-reel tapes back and forwards and so forth. But any correspondence back home, and that's what makes this book and so strong, is the correspondence between the two. I mean, we're talking about people in two totally different worlds. The young lady back here in North Carolina, which is kind of quiet, conservative anyway, and then what's going on in Vietnam, that just in the story in itself, and y'all have done a fantastic job. And so
Well,
while we got you,
project.
Pete, while we got you on the phone, if someone wanted to purchase this book, how would they go about doing it?
You have to ask Kathryn.
Okay.
You contact Amazon or iUniverse.
Or Amazon or iUniverse.
And in the Raleigh area, they carry it at Quail Ridge, and it's at the birthplace in Wake Forest, at the Wake Forest College birthplace. And Page 158 Books has had it in their store. I'm not sure what they have now, but they have had it in the past.
So you're out there watching. If you know a Vietnam vet or someone who was related to a Vietnam vet, buy a couple copies of the book and share it with them, and they will thoroughly enjoy it. I've talked with some other Vietnam vets who've read the book and read it almost religiously from time to time, and buy copies and share them out there because it tells the story of a Vietnam vet that most people can't relate to, which after they read the book and hear the stories from Captain Fox, so that they now can understand a little bit more about what was going on. As you know, people would come ask you a question if they had the nerve enough to ask you about Vietnam, but it was hard to explain to them if you weren't there. And I think this book explains to them, even if they weren't there, better than anything I've seen. It's just sitting down and trying to explain to someone what was going on. Most people didn't understand, but this was explaining to a young, naive young lady in North Carolina, and I think it would help people today who were involved in the Vietnam War to read and hear just how Captain Fox explained and what was going on to this young lady.
That was one interesting thing about using the letters as a vehicle to tell the tale, is you can do with letters what you can't do with just prose or fiction or whatever, because letters are so personal, and so it offered the opportunity to get into these characters and understand their situation as opposed to the other situation, which was on the other end of the letters. And there's some complexity about all that just kind of works.
Yeah, you got time to build the character and so forth of of the person so that they're more realistic. Part of the problem.
Yeah,
with,
and there's no self-consciousness. You know, if you think about it, when you write a letter, you're not being self-conscious as if you're talking to somebody face to face or any other way.
I think they both shared a lot more than they would have if they'd just gone out on a date. They shared a lot more about who they were and what they wanted out of life, and you know what their goals were. And he wanted to be a farmer when he got back, and she grew up on a farm and wasn't sure she wanted to live on a farm again, as you know, after college. So they had to deal with those issues as well as the women's issues that came up during that time. What could a woman do? What were her options at that time? And it was just beginning to change. So,
Pete, where are you from in North Carolina?
I was raised in Wake Forest, in a little town of Wake Forest.
A little town of Wake Forest. All right.
I was there when the college was still there. I remember
Oh, you were?
the college was still in Wake Forest.
What year did they leave? We were trying to figure that out.
They left on June the 12th, 1956. I remember it well because I was riding my bicycle on South Main Street, and I looked up, and here came 20, count them, 20 Greyhound buses and 20 moving vans. And they moved that college in one day.
Jeez. All right. Well, I wanted you to know that I'm going to go eat a Shorty's hot dog tomorrow just in your honor.
Well, my name's on the wall there somewhere.
All right. All right. Shorty's is the hot dog place there in Wake Forest. It's been there about 100 years, I guess. In fact, they just celebrated their anniversary. And Wake Forest is probably one of the best veteran-friendly places there. They got the moving wall coming in October, and Kathryn's going to be speaking there. It's October 18th, 19th, 20th, and I think 21st. And you're going to be speaking on the 20th?
it's the Friday night.
The Friday
So
night,
that
okay, that would be the 19th, I believe.
think that's right.
She's going to be speaking there. So if you're out there in the audience, if you're in this area, buy a book and bring it down, and we'll probably get her to autograph it for you. I mean, she'd probably do that, but she's going to be speaking at the opening of the wall and so forth in Wake Forest. So be sure and come by. Get you an airline ticket and fly down here and so forth. And,
Right.
Well, I'll tell you, I knew Shorty, the fellow that the place was named after. And
he passed away recently.
well,
The
that
young
was
Shorty,
his,
that's
that
the
was
son.
his,
Oh, young son. Okay, the young Shorty. Okay.
That was the young fellow. Now, I knew that, the old timer back in the old days. And he was quite a businessman, and he had a brother named Worth. And at 9 o'clock at night, he'd send Worth out to drive around town to see if anybody was moving around. And if there was nobody moving around, he'd shut down. But if there was one car out there moving around, he'd stay open.
Well, I tell you what, that place is packed on the weekends and during the day for lunch. He gets the people in there. By the way, you were at the Newsman Observer. Did you know Dennis Rogers?
I met Dennis Rogers on several occasions because we were both Vietnam veterans, and we went to some of the same.
He and I grew up.
He and I
from Wilson together. I've known Dennis for a long, long time.
Well, he was quite the fellow, and I enjoyed seeing him the few times that I did, and he was a very good writer.
Well, I don't know whether you can see it. Pete, I don't know whether you can see it or not, but we have your picture up on the screen there, sitting in your airplane. What is that airplane?
Yeah.
It's hard to tell from.
Well, that's the A6 Intruder.
Okay.
And what you're looking at is the pilot's side. The pilot and the bombardier navigator sat side by side. This is the pilot's side, and the ladder is down. And you're on the left side of the screen is the intake for one of the engines, and you can see where the wing takes off there. And what I'm doing in that photograph is giving a signal to the fellow on the ground to go ahead and start engine number one. And the canopy is back. You can barely see the top of the head of the navigator. You can see his helmet on the other side, but he sat down into the back a little bit because he had a tremendous amount of computer equipment in front of him. And we were getting ready to take off on some kind of hop over there in Vietnam.
Yeah. You supported mostly ground troops?
Well, we flew during the day from time to time, but my biggest deal was I flew at night. Just about every night I was there on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and we were hitting the supply routes that went up into North Vietnam. and we took a tremendous amount of anti-aircraft fire up there, but we were able to, we were able to do some damage to the infrastructure of their supply system. So I flew mostly at night, but this is one of those rare day hops, which I loved because you got to go around and look at stuff.
Yeah.
And that picture's got my name on it.
That one, we have that picture with First Lieutenant G.C. Hendrix, and is that CPL? Is that Corporal?
No.
Corporal Darby. He was my plane captain. He was from Indianapolis, and he and I were best friends because he took care of my airplane for me.
Yes.
And when I was a test pilot while I was over there, I had to test the planes that came out of check, and I used to take Darby up with me on the test hops, and he loved it. But I told him, if he's going to put an engine in my airplane, he's going to have to fly in that sucker before
Amen.
anybody else.
It's going to be in good shape. He's going to have to fly.
That's right. But he loved it, and he was just a great human. He took really good care of that airplane.
And then we got up on the slide, we got some pictures of your medals and so forth. The National Defense, can't hardly tell, the Vietnam Service Ribbon. What's the one with the propellers?
Well, the one on the right is the Vietnam Service.
Yeah.
And then the 15 is the air medals. There were 15 different air medals awarded, and the Distinguished Flying Cross is on the left.
All right. Well, gotcha. Let's see. I got this
the
one.
Republic of Vietnam Service Medal.
And I guess that's your hooch you stayed in with that air conditioning.
Oh yeah, we landed. We usually landed just before the sun came up, and so our only sleep possibility was between daybreak and noon. And of course, it got up to 110 or so every day in the warm season. So they had these air conditioners running off of these generators. The pilots who flew at night slept in the air-conditioned hooches. There were 8 pilots in that building. In room number A, there were 2, and then 2 on the other side, and then at the far end there were 4 other pilots.
Well, I hate to tell you, those barrels weren't going to do a whole lot of good. They didn't have a whole lot of sand in them, looks like.
Well, the bunker was outside, and what you had to do is when the thing went off, you had to run outside and get in the bunker. But I would just roll out of the rack, and lay on the floor.
Yeah.
And the barrels worked if you were laying on the floor.
We didn't go into bunkers very much where I was either, because Mama Son liked to use it for a bathroom.
Oh. That and there's rats.
Oh yes, everybody in Vietnam has a rat story.
Mm-hmm.
The rats are bigger than cats.
Yes,
and they were a lot prettier.
And they tell me they taste better too. So
I don't know about that one.
Where were you stationed?
I was at Danang.
Danang. Danang Air Base today. Danang Air Base today is probably, the runway is probably about 100 feet long with a couple of revetments. That's all that's left.
Really?
Yes, I've been back over a couple of times, but I tell you what, downtown Danang right now is absolutely gorgeous. The beaches, of course, China Beach is, you would not believe what's there, but the high-rise buildings and so forth. You probably then, did you say Marble Mountain now has a freestanding elevator with a bridge going across to the mountain, so you don't have to walk so far if you're going up Marble Mountain.
Wow.
And
I had a couple of friends punch out over Marble Mountain and land right on top of it.
Oh. I tell you what, there's a really, Sandy Beach is absolutely gorgeous resort there. Now we have a picture of, it looks like, I guess that is a runway at Danang?
No, this is an air base in Saigon.
Oh.
This came from my friend.
Is that Tan Son Nhut?
It's a military base near Saigon.
That would be Tan Son Nhut. Okay.
My friend from high school sent these pictures, and Pete didn't have a picture of the base to give him.
Okay,
so.
I guess that's Tan Son Nhut. Then it's hard to tell in the picture and so forth. But
it's very orderly.
My friend was Don Martin. He's a SPC 5 Don Martin, and he's the one who sent the pictures.
Now, how did you get y'all? I guess you flew over. Did you fly over commercial planes to Vietnam? As late as you went on, some of the early Marines, of course, went on the ships, but I guess you flew over.
Yeah, it took us commercials to Okinawa, and then we sat there and waited until we got your 1:30 into Danang. And I got there just in time for Cambodia in 1970.
Oh.
Yeah, I was really there 2 years after this novel takes place.
Yeah.
And when I rolled into town, they were just starting the Cambodian operation. So my first few hops were in Cambodia.
Yeah.
That was, of course, late April and early May of 1970.
While you got you on, I'd like for Kathryn, if you would, to read one of the letters. Read us a letter and kind of get so we can get to feel the letters from Captain Fox and Ashley,
Well,
if you would.
I'd like to share this with you.
Okay.
When they're first writing, they don't know each other, and they don't know. She doesn't know how to sign her letters to him, and he signs his Semper Fi, which means ever faithful, and she signs it fondly. And in one of the letters, he says, "Now, what in the hell is fondly? That sounds like something old men do to young children." So she has to figure out how to sign the letters. And then another letter, early on in their relationship, he tells her to, now we must speak of love. This is the end of his letter. As you can tell from my letters, I know nothing of it. We joke about the theories. You said in your last letter that love is too intimate a word to use in closing your letters, but your letters are full of love. Each letter is an act of love. Yours are the only love letters I've gotten since I've been at the war. So write me a love letter. And they hardly know each other. So she says, "My dearest darling pilot, parentheses, how am I doing so far? My life has been so empty since you went away to war. My body has such yearning, I may become a whore. You took me to the mountaintop and gave me oh such love, and now I send you letters on wings of a great white dove. I love, 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 love you. I would not tell a lie. You are my American hero, my slice of apple pie. The morning comes too quickly. My bed is soft but cold. If I do not see you soon, I surely will grow old. Oh, come to me, my handsome prince. Fly in your big steel bird. Your presence is much better than this paper and your word." That just gives you an idea of how they tease back and forth and what they're saying to each other. And
I can see where it was a lot of fun to write.
It was a lot of fun to write it. And she also, I'd like to share something he wrote about when they were having a problem once in the air. And so he writes it to her. And she's told him to be safe because he told her about an incident they had. He says, "A tremendous amount of bombing is going on, but the gooks keep rolling down the trail, so we get new targets all the time. Also, under the heading of safety, yesterday we got shot up a little, and the airplane wasn't flying right. We had 40 fire trucks and 2 helicopters waiting to put out the fire if we screwed up the landing. About 4 miles out, with the landing gear malfunctioning and with the tension at its greatest, Randy said, 'Hey, Grit.' I said, 'What?' He said, 'Sure do wish we was dove hunting in North Carolina right now.'" So that just gives you an idea of how they're writing back and forth, sharing really tough situations, but they're trying to share a part of each other with letters.
Pete, by the way, just let you know that about an hour or so, a couple of hours after the show, you can go back to Nissan Communications and see the show. Tell all your friends about it. It'll be on YouTube and Facebook out there, so you can share it with all your new friends out there in New Mexico. You can tell them about your book and prove it to them that you wrote the book and so forth. And
Okay. Well, I appreciate you having us on, and I've enjoyed it. I'm gonna hang up now because Kathryn really, this is her project, and I just had a really good time being Vijay Farts.
Well, he was a great writer, and I was honored to write with him. I'd like to read another thing, Pete, before you get off, or you can hear it even if you get off the phone, I guess. But this is, he's trying to go back to Sydney for R&R. When he went to Sydney the first time, he met a girl there, and that was when they were just beginning to write to each other. But now he kind of likes Ashley, and he's trying to get her to tell him not to go. So this is what he says. "When I told you about my trip to Sydney back in May, I did not mention that while I was there, I met a girl. Her name is Jennifer Tracy. She's very Australian, older than me, a nurse. I met her on the beach, and she happened to have a few days off, so we went to the mountains on the train. I didn't mention her to you because I thought it was something that just happened and was over. Now I've gotten a letter from her. She wants me to come back down. I sure could use a week in Australia, especially after this big weapons evaluation I'm doing. 2 colonels and a major are flying here from D.C. to observe the evaluation. So I'll be meeting with the fat cats after I fly every day, talking about our tests. It'll drive me nuts, so Australia sounds real good. But I don't know if it matters to you. I need some advice here. I've become attached to you and our weekly visits. I trust you. Maybe you can help me figure out if I should go back. So this is her response to him. Dear Captain Kangaroo, so you went down to Australia to meet a little filly named Tracy. So you spent several days with her in the mountains. So she's older than you. I suspect you lost all track of time with Miss Tacky. So she's a nurse. Did you play doctor? So she's not going to tell him what to do. He's got to decide what to do. But she lets him know.
Well, at least you didn't go to Hong Kong. That would have been a whole new story. Well, Pete, I appreciate it. And I just wanted to tell you, welcome home.
Thank you, sir. Welcome home to you. And I'll tell you one thing about being in Santa Fe, New Mexico. There's a lot of veterans here, and everybody welcomes us home.
Well, listen, tell them about this show. We try to tell the truth about Vietnam veterans and the Vietnam War, try to dispel the myths and misunderstandings and the downright lies about those there. And we try to do this twice a month. And Amnon, like I said, donates facilities and so forth. And we're out there trying to tell the real story. So I do appreciate it, and spread the word out there.
All right, and thank you for what you're doing. I appreciate it. See you, Kathryn.
Bye-bye.
All right. Now, Kathryn, we had Pete on there. Let's talk about some of the pictures. You want to?
Okay, this is another one from my friend Don Martin from high school, and that's just a berm around the perimeter.
That's a perimeter with the fence and the berm. Yes.
Right. Right. All right. That's just another one with a lonely soldier sitting out there contemplating what's going on, I think, and of course Don.
You can see some of the little bunkers and machine gun slots there, where people get into.
Right.
And
that's my friend Don Martin, who shared the pictures,
Don.
and he gave permission. We could not use pictures that had the faces of any other soldiers because we couldn't get permission from them.
Yeah.
And we don't know what happened to them, but Don is fine.
Yeah. Okay.
And he, Pete, as Jay Fox talks about playing basketball and some of the games they played. This is just an example.
Yeah, basketball and volleyball. We played Jungle Rules volleyball. You can see the net there.
And I think they played football too.
Yeah, they played. There's a picture of them playing football, but we used to love to play volleyball. We played a lot of Jungle Rules volleyball, which means there were no rules.
Really, Jungle Rules.
And that's a picture of Long Bend Bob Hope show.
Right, and that was something he talked about going.
That looks like about 68.
I'm not sure exactly when Don was there. I believe he was there in 68.
Because we had people up on the poles. We had that kind of crowd. I remember being there. So
that's in playing football.
You're playing football,
outside.
And you see all the helicopters on the backside.
As long as we didn't have their faces, we could use that picture, and that gave you an idea of what guys tried to do when they had a little bit of free time.
As you can see, the rocks and so forth that played on
And Jay Fox talks about playing basketball mostly in the book, but he said one night they blew up the floor, and so this dribbling was really hard because all the cement was broken, and they had to play where it was blown up one time. Okay. Just guys sitting around
having a good time, drinking a beer.
Right.
The drink of choice in Vietnam was beer because the water was terrible. So we consumed a lot of beer, or they did. Unfortunately, I didn't like beer, so.
This is the
like
a barge heading towards Saigon.
That's, probably the Saigon River. Okay.
This is in Sydney.
Most
of the guys went to Sydney on Arno. You went to Hawaii because you were married, I think, but.
Sydney was really the choice place for, I would say, most of the officers and so forth. A lot of the enlisted men went to Hong Kong and stayed drunk the whole time they were there and so forth. But
well, Jay Fox, the character in the book, went to Australia.
Australia, yes.
And so we added these shots of Sydney. Of course, he went up in the mountains with this little nurse that he met. So that's a park in Sydney.
That's the park in Sydney. Okay,
Right.
Because I was going to say now that's the well, we were hoping to get that.
Yeah,
while
I'm
people's
sorry
there.
we didn't get it, but that was what he used. He said he kept it on his knee, and they were the coordinates for the flight that night, and you could see where they wrote in pencil when they changed. They changed them and wrote them in pencil.
Kind of a grease pencil, yeah.
Right.
You started out. When you took off, you were going one place, and depending on what was going on, they may change you several times during the evening.
Right.
But,
And he flew. I mean, it sounded pretty dangerous. They would fly through this barrage of firepower, and then they would drop the bombs and try to get the guys that were shooting at them. And
Yeah.
he said in one of his letters how much he respected the Vietnamese who were shooting at him because they were really good, but they weren't as good as he was. He was kind of a hot dog.
yeah. Is
That's
that the nurse?
college. No,
Yeah.
that's the college student.
Okay.
She talks about going to the beach once.
Oh,
in
okay.
one of her
That was
letters.
Representative Ashley.
Right. Right.
Okay.
And that's her, I guess, college
Okay.
picture of her.
All right.
And she also went to Maine one summer, and I went to Maine, so I used some of my experiences there in my trip to Maine. And he talks about flying over. We actually, when she keeps saying fondly to him, he names his airplane Fondly. So Fondly becomes a character in the book, and he's going to fly to Acadia National Park and land, come flying over the bubbles, the mountains, over the Acadia, the Jordan Pond where she worked, and and she's going to, all the girls are going to be so jealous of this pilot flying up to get her. So they just carry on this crazy stuff in the letters. That's the Jordan Pond in Acadia National Park in Maine.
In Maine, okay.
Near Bar Harbor.
All right. That's where Ashley went. Yeah.
Yeah, she's sitting on the rocks looking
Okay.
out. That's
That's
how
pretty.
it's absolutely stunning. And she shares some of that summer with him because they're
Okay.
writing. And she's in she sings, she's Liza Doolittle in a play.
Oh,
That's it.
okay. Liza Doolittle. Okay.
So she sends him that, talks about that. He's always talking about playing his git fiddle, which is, and when his git fiddle got busted. And this is Seal Harbor. This was Rockefeller's dock, where Nelson Rockefeller had a dock there.
In Maine.
He
Okay.
actually came to dinner at the Jordan Pond House where I worked as a waitress one time, and came in the kitchen and spoke to everybody. And that's just Soame Sound in Maine, just a boat in Soame Sound. It's a beautiful place if you've never been there.
Looks
and
like
one of-
Ashley had a good time there.
She did have a good time. She got to do things she never got to do down here. One of the guys taught sailing, and there were very wealthy people that lived up there, and he could borrow their boat. So he took some of the kids from the Jordan Pond House out sailing one day. And this was going from Stonington, Maine to Ilaho, which is an island that they don't have cars. And a guy and I went over there once and had a picnic, so on a day off. They were just, and that was Echo Lake. It was so cold, usually you couldn't go swimming up there, but you could go swimming in Echo Lake one time in July when it was really hot. So that was a picture of that.
That one day.
But walking in the water, I remember walking out in the water and my feet turned purple in just a few minutes, just walking. And that was Seal Harbor. That was that picture you saw, walking out in that water.
Right.
So she tells him all about these experiences she's having. And they're just friends, but they get to be more than friends through the letters. And that's just a picture of her. And she talks, the last part of it, she goes to Paris and talks about seeing a lady who probably dances in the Moulin Rouge. She has extensions in her hair down to the ground, and she's just absolutely stunning. And I actually went to Paris about 3 years ago and took this picture of the Moulin Rouge because we could use it in the book. And you cannot see it, but on that marquee over on the side, it had 68 film festival.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know that when I took the picture, but when I got back and looked at it, but the picture,
Yeah, you can see it a little bit on there.
but
now,
it says 68 film
Yeah, I doctored
festival,
the
and I
picture a little
thought
bit.
that was amazing.
Yeah.
That this picture I took 3 years ago.
It was there just for you to take the picture.
It was exactly right. It was perfect for the book.
Okay.
So
Now this is review or statement by Lieutenant Colonel Jim Dyer, who's a friend of ours, both of us. I could not put the book down and read it cover to cover in one sitting. Any veteran spouse or friend of a veteran for or against our involvement in Vietnam knows the importance of mail call. Lieutenant Colonel Jim Dyer, United States Army retired, helicopter pilot when he was in Vietnam. And so I suggest that any of y'all out there get a copy of the book. And I know you'll enjoy it. Kathryn, thank you for being on the show tonight.
Thank
and
you
in
for
closing, you
having
got
me.
anything you want to say about the book, or other than just saying, please buy my book? What would you want to say to get out there? I hope we get enough interest tonight and to kind of pick their interest to go out there and get the book. I know they will thoroughly enjoy it. And we've got just about another minute to go ahead and say what you got to say.
Well, I really think the book could be a movie. I think that the Raleigh Little Theater had a couple of actors read some of the letters last spring, before they had a play, and I introduced the letters that they read, and I saw that it could probably be a play or a movie, and that would be exciting to see if that ever happened. But I just recommend it to people. Letter writing is a lost art, and you share a lot more in letters than you do immediately in texting or emails. And so I'm very proud of it, and I'm very proud to work with Pete. He's a great writer, and you could tell from he's got a lot of personality, and his personality came through in the letters.
Yes.
And thank you so much for having me.
Certainly. Thank you for watching our show. We hope you had some value for you. If you wish to see this show or any other previous shows, again, just log in on www.nissancommunications.com live and select the show. It'd be listed as to any soldier. Our next show will be May 9th, 8 o'clock, same station. It's going to be on desertion. I think you'll enjoy some of the stories. I'm going to throw a question out at you. If you're out there and you were in Vietnam, did you ever hear of salt and pepper? I'll explain to you who salt and pepper is on our next show, but don't know if they existed or not, but it was one of the many rumors out there. Of course, there was enough rumors in Vietnam to go around for everybody 2 or 3 times. Thank you for tuning in, and looking forward to seeing you May 9th. Thank you.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.